a guy that we haven't talked about as much as of late. We talked a lot about him when he was slumping and struggling, but since he's been doing well, we haven't been talking about him as much. It's Nick Castellanos. Nick Castellanos, over the last 7 days alone, in his 22 at-bats, has scored 2 runs. He's had 8 hits, a double, 4 RBIs, 4 walks, and he's had a 364, 462, 409 split with an 871 OPS. You look at the progression of Nick Castellanos, he's continuously been getting better. In the last 15 days, he's had 2 home runs, 12 RBIs in the last 15 days on 18 hits and 5 walks with a 367 batting average and a 429 OBP. Nick Castellanos has been great offensively, but also defensively. We saw him, the first guy to crash into the ivy last night. Of course, got some in his eye, needed some help from Yoro. He's been doing great in right field and also with his at-bats. And Tyler, it's been fun to see, as much as people talked about him, DFA him, get rid of him, Nick sucks, this, that, and the third. He's shown and stepped up right when you need him to be able to deliver on both ends of the game.
Well, I think and the criticism was justifiable in the first couple of months of the year. He was really, really struggling to a point. I'll even go to this point. You can pinpoint a day, May 28th. They had just wrapped up a series against the San Francisco Giants. Do you know what Nick Castellanos was hitting on May 28th?
No.
198 through the first 2 months of the season. After last night, his average is up to 232. Now, I know that you say 232 is still not good, and you're correct. 232 is not a great average by any means. But for a everyday player, Nick Castellanos has been legitimately an everyday player for this team. And I don't say that hyperbolically. I'm pretty sure he's played every single game to this point. To raise your average 34 points over the course of a little more than a month, from May 28th to July 2nd, which is what, a month and 4 days, to raise your average 34 points over the course of that time frame, playing every day the way that he has been pretty spectacular. Like, I know you were bringing up some of the numbers, and I believe it was what'd you say, 19 of his last 26 games, I think he has a hit in. So basically over the course of June and into last night, he doesn't have a hit in 7 games. The OBP has risen. He's never going to be a high walk guy, but because of the hits, the OBP has risen. The slugging is the important part because, again, he's not a high walk guy, which means you need to rely on extra base hits to get to raise that slugging. Well, not that walks contribute to slugging, but my point is, like, you need to have a higher slugging when you're not going to walk a ton. And for a guy to, I believe, have 8 doubles in the month of June after having just 5 over the course of the first 2 months, I think, listen, we're going to live and die with Nick Castellanos and the peaks and the valleys. And the peaks are legit, and the valleys are probably equally legit, right? Like, they're bad, but you could say they are legitimate valleys. But when you have a guy who is capable of doing this over the course of a month, that's the peak. There may be a come down at some point, but I think the signs past the numbers tell you that he's trending, at least, I don't want to say he's like trending straight up, but he's at least going like in a diagonal in the right direction, because I think his chase rate has come down a little bit. His whiff rate is about the same, but it's come down a little bit. He doesn't look as flawed at the plate as he did in the first couple of months of the year. And I know I use the word flail a lot, but he was flailing, right? He especially against right-handed pitching, he was flailing out of hand, especially with the breaking ball, right? The sliders and the curveballs were just killing him. And when you look at his numbers and his metrics specifically, right, the chase rate's still bad, the whiff rate's still bad, but that's a product of how bad he was in May and basically in May and the early portion of June before kind of kicking the corner a little bit. I know that you're going to look at the numbers and say you need more from a $20 million player, but the player that Nick Castellanos was in June, especially missing Trey Turner, missing Bryce Harper for a week, missing Kyle Schwarber for a week, missing JT Realmuto for 3 weeks now or whatever it's been. The player that Nick Castellanos was in June was incredibly important to this team's success. We talked about Trey Turner being important since he's returned. Nick Castellanos was really, really critical to this team kind of treading water while the rest of their guys get back and healthy.
Yeah, it's great points you bring up, because he has mentioned how much he's adjusted his game. Little things such as his hand placement on the bat, his balance of his legs, his head when he's, at bats, his swings. He's done a better job of just staying in his swings and not swinging out of control. He does notoriously still swing at first pitches, but that's Nick Castellanos. And overall, he's been much more disciplined at the plate. And I know you guys are mentioning how Whit Merrifield can take some advice and take some notes from Nick. The fact that in the first there was 3 games in March, but I'm going to include, of course. So the first 3 games of the season in March and in April, Nick Castellanos had a whopping total of 1 triple, 0 doubles, 9 RBIs, and 2 home runs. On the season, Nick has 11 home runs and 42 RBIs. You want to know where those home runs and RBIs came? It was in June. And for him in May, you saw the increase. But in June, Nick Castellanos got 4 of his 11 home runs on the season, but 18 of his 42 RBIs, nearly half of his RBIs came in 1 month. And as you mentioned, his batting average improved. He also finished out the month of June with 8 doubles as well as a triple, and then had, again, those 4 home runs. So for Nick Castellanos in 1 month to really be able to take a stride, I won't say it was something, it's not going to jump off the page at you. It's not, something that's going to be earth-shattering. But Nick Castellanos has been improving his hits, 29 hits in the month of June, which is more than, each month continue to progress. And you did have a Nick who wasn't getting hits. He was going over. He was struggling. So I think for him, as Darth Pooh was mentioning, April was bad. And we saw him start to come out of that. You mentioned that May 28th date. You saw him since around Memorial Day weekend. That May 28th game was against San Francisco. And from there, we got 4 hits from Nick in the last 2 games of May, and it rolled right into June. So I do love the fact that Nick has been quietly consistent. This is what you expect from him. He has typically been see ball, hit ball, chasing a lot of pitches, but Nick has just been giving you enough. The effort's there, and him in the outfield, I agree with somebody in the chat said earlier. Him, Yoro, Brandon Marsh, they were great in the outfield last night. It was like smooth. The chemistry is there. They're getting Yoro's helping him get ivy out of his eye. They're picking each other up. They're checking on each other. I saw a lot of thumbs up and pats on the back, and it's the little things. And I feel like Nick has really quietly stepped up as a leader for this team. It's someone that you wouldn't even expect, especially in the midst of all these injuries. He's been consistent. We talk about it. He plays every game. But you know what? He is rising as a leader for this group, and someone that is also in the running of being, an all-star. And I don't think he's an all-star, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think he is exactly what this team needs as that leader, role player, consistent cog in the wheel.
Yeah, 501 slugging in April is just, it's going to, like Darth Pooh mentioned, it's going to tank your numbers for a bulk of the year, especially, again, when you're playing every single day the way that Nick Castellanos does. But a 501 that's OPS, a 501 OPS, a 501 slugging would be significant for him. A 501 OPS in April, a 706 OPS in May, and then in June, an 811 OPS. And again, a guy that doesn't walk because, he is see ball, hit ball type of hitter. And so when you have an OPS that's getting into the 800s over the course of a month, when you aren't walking, his on-base percentage, I believe, is still under 300 for the season. It's 291. So when your OBP is that low and you have a month where you have an OPS of 801, that means you're clearly trending in the right direction. You mentioned it, 13 extra base hits in the month of June. What was it? The 8 home runs, or the 8 doubles, the 4 home runs, and the triple in the month of June.
Yeah.
I know we gave him a lot of crap, and rightfully so, because he really, 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 should I say it one more time, really struggled in the first 2 months of the year. But as much crap as we gave him for the first 2 months of the year, I think we have to give him one of these for the month of June.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. A lot of his May numbers came later in May, but when you look at his batting average alone, to go from 183 to 229 in May to 276 in June, he has, and then of course now he's at a nice 3.33 because it's only been 1 game in July. He has been consistently improving. He has been playing every game, and to the points in the chat about how many games he's played, he did sit out 1 game that we didn't see Nick Castellanos in right field, but he is consistent for this team. He's someone that you you know is going to be out there. You know what you're going to get from him. And what we've seen in June has been a lot more Nick Castellanos than traditionally. So it's great to see the consistency is there for Nick and that he has been a good complimentary piece, supporting piece, especially to someone like a Trey Turner during this time, Alec Boehm, during this time when they're without Bryce and Kyle Schwarber.